So we got a Saturday evening service call on a walk-in freezer and a walk-in cooler. This is an older restaurant. This is their semi-quasi refrigeration rack. It's cooled by a swamp cooler. I walked down into the restaurant. The walk-in cooler is at 41, which isn't too bad, but obviously there's something going on. And the walk-in freezer fans aren't running at all. So we're gonna open up the rack and see what we find. I pulled the covers off the rack. Right now, the first thing I noticed when I pulled one of these covers off was it's about, I'd say 140, 150 degrees in here right now. The swamp cooler's running, but I guarantee the water pump's not running. And this thing has to have that water pump running in order to force the air out these that louver right there. So I imagine we're gonna have some kind of an overheat issue. The walk-in cooler is actually running, but we'll see. We'll go through it all. But the walk-in freezer, it's like we got one fan motor running, but my compressor's hot and it's not running right now. So we'll get into it. All right, so we don't know, this might be good or bad. Our compressor's not running. If you can tell right here, our contactor's pulled in. I already checked with the meter. I've got 3-phase 208 coming in and 3-phase 208 going out. The compressor's hot, so let's hope it's just off on internal overload and we don't have open windings. We'll find out right now. I'm gonna cool off the compressor with a water hose and see if I can get the windings to reset. Okay, so all that I'm gonna do is just very carefully cool off the head of this compressor without getting everything else wet. Just like this. Notice I put the electrical cover back on so that way the water wouldn't go into the bottom of those conduits. Trying to keep from soaking the condenser fan motors. I'm just gonna let it cool. Just keep going. We'll keep going on the process for about 5 minutes. And we'll see if we can get that internal overload reset. Okay, so I cooled off the compressor and it is what I thought. There. Yeah, the compressor was off on thermal. So now that I cooled it off, I can read resistance between all 3 windings. It's equal. This is a 3-phase compressor, so we're getting about 1.9 on each of the windings. So now the question is the compressor bad? I'm gonna have to put it back together and turn the power on. But while I was sitting here, when I first walked up, I noticed that that left fan motor was running, but this one was not, is locked up. So let's just hope that it's just an overheated compressor and that it hasn't been doing this long enough to cause damage to the compressor. Keep in mind that the water pump, I'm pretty confident, is not running on the swamp cooler, and we lost a condenser fan motor. So we've been running off of one. And here in Palm Springs, which is where we're at, we're actually out in La Quinta, they were damn near close to 90, if not a little bit higher today. So I can imagine this thing constantly overheating all day. So I'm gonna put it all back together electrically and try to start it up and see if the compressor is good. And then if that's the case, then we'll work on getting that fan motor changed and getting that water pump fixed. Also, they called me about their walk-in cooler, which is this unit. And when they said it was at like 50 something degrees, but when I got here it was at 41 degrees. And it has satisfied, since I took the doors off this rack, it satisfied 5 minutes after I took the doors off. So I'm pretty confident that this was overheating also. All because the water pump on this swamp cooler wasn't working. So I'll look into that a little bit more, but because that was at 41, I'm not too concerned with that at the moment. I'm pretty sure it's, you know, down to 35 by now. But I'm focusing on the walk-in freezer right now. So this will be the moment of truth. Also, you know, we're assuming everything's properly grounded, but I also just saturated this whole area with water. So we want to be cautious about standing in a puddle of water and turning the circuit breaker on. Luckily, there's not too much water over here, but you know, I'm just saying you want to stand back when you're doing this just to make sure we don't got a grounded compressor. God forbid we had a grounded compressor, you know, worst case scenario, and the unit wasn't properly grounded. That would be scary, you know, especially when I'm standing in a puddle of water. So we're gonna flip this guy on. That doesn't look too good. Nope. She does not look good at all. It did not start. I'm gonna turn it off and cool it off a little. Okay, so it's not a lucky night for me. That compressor would not start. I kicked it a few times, it's locked up. It draws lock rotor amps and it goes off on internal overload. I tried cooling it off again, nothing. So we've got 3-phase power going to it. You turn on power, it hums for a second, draws locked rotor, then clicks out on overload. Nothing we can do, so I get to have a fun night changing the compressor tonight. So got some lights set up and got a whole thing going on. We're gonna recover the gas right now and then get to changing. It's gonna be a fun night. I'll try to keep you guys in the loop. So I had a hell of a time getting this rotor lock nut off. Leverager's your best friend. Blew my mind because when I pulled the nut, something red fell out. See that little red plastic thing right there? And there's a little piece of something down there, and I'm flipping out wondering what the hell it is. Holy crap. It's a freaking plastic like thing that plugs the copper pipe or something. It's a wonder this thing has worked as long as it did. Look at that. I don't know how. That's crazy. Blow your mind some of the things you'll find in compressors. That's nuts. It's amazing that thing's ever worked like that. Just a little tip. I've got the compressor out. I'm gonna go ahead and change the condenser fan motor since it's easier, you know, then I don't gotta trip over the compressor. And I haven't decided yet, but I'm thinking about changing the high pressure control too. I'm assuming that the thing was shutting off on high pressure, but just happening so much that the compressor went off on internal overload, but I really don't know. So it's kind of a gamble. I could leave the high pressure control, charge it up, and test it, but then have to recover all the gas. So I'm thinking that since I've got the compressor out, all the gas is out, I'm gonna go ahead and just put in a dual pressure control that's got a high and a low. This thing also has a fan cycle control on it, but we really don't need it out here. So we'll see. I think I'm gonna go ahead and replace it since I got it all out. Just, you know, that way I don't gotta trip over the compressor trying to change all that stuff. So far, so good. Other than that piece of plastic tripping me out. I'm pretty sure what that is, I'm pretty sure that was the red plastic cap that comes in the rotor lock valves. But what's really tripping me out though is that rotor lock valve, that's factory, I think. See, I think if I remember right on this condensing unit, I believe that the condensing unit comes with the rotor lock valve and you make your connection right here. So I think that was a factory mistake. Because I know whenever you buy a rotor lock valve, it comes with a red cap right here on this side. And that's factory on this compressor, man. I mean, on this condensing unit. It's really tripping me out. I can't believe that. Because we added this CPR valve just because it was a walk-in freezer. But I'm pretty sure that it comes with this right here, and then you just stub into that roto. God damn, that blows my mind, man. That thing's been running for that many years, okay, with this big old plastic piece in there. What a trip. So it's been a long night, but compressor's replaced, charging it up right now. Didn't really run into any problems. What I ended up doing, like I had mentioned before, I ended up pulling the fan cycle control out of the picture, just wiring up both condenser fan motors to run all the time. We don't have cool enough weather out here. We're not going to have to worry about the fan cycling. I ended up changing the compressor contactor also, just to be safe, and liquid dryer, of course. And that's pretty much it. So we're just gonna, actually I just got the liquid line or the receiver full of gas, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the power on and pop the solenoid valve on downstairs, get some gas flowing. Kicking on right now. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Now we're just going to charge it up. She's running like she should be. That's good. It's got a flashing sight glass right now, but I got to charge it, so we're good. I'm happy. I'll get this charged up, then finish up. Okay, so it's running pretty good. Got the sight glass cleared up. Let the system run for a few minutes. I initially put some gas in there, got it operating, cleared up the sight glass, set the CPR valve. I wanted to make sure the CPR valve was set correctly because of that debris I found in there. You know, that could have been affecting the way the CPR valve was set before, so I made sure under a heavy load I adjusted the CPR valve. It did have to adjust a little bit. I got it to the run load amps, you know, on pull down basically. So now we're just watching it come down in temperature. System's running good so far. I'm going to let it get cold enough and test the defrost just to be 100% sure. That's where we're at. So I just want to kind of recap what happened here. I got a service call today on a walk-in freezer not working. When I called them back to confirm the service call, they said all of a sudden now their walk-in cooler was not working either. The manager was complaining that the walk-in cooler was at 50 degrees and the walk-in freezer was well above freezing. I kind of already had a hunch because I know this restaurant and I know the way that this rack works. It's pressurized by that swamp cooler. So that swamp cooler has to be working, or all the heat from every one of those condensing units pressurizes this thing and it just overheats everything. Everything goes off on high head pressure. So when I got here, what I actually found was the swamp cooler was running, but the water pump was not running. So all those condensing units are putting out all that heat and it's just blowing 80 degree air or 90 degree air, which is what it was out here today, across them, and it's not enough to get that heat out of that rack. Okay, so that was problem number one. Problem number two was that we had a bad condenser fan motor also on that walk-in freezer condensing unit. I honestly believe that that condenser fan motor has been bad for a while, and probably what's been happening is today was one of the warmer days out here of the season, of the spring, and I have a feeling that that thing has been cycling on high head pressure for a while now. So much that it ruined the compressor. The compressor went off on thermal overload so many times that this time it didn't come out of thermal overload and it locked up, seized the bearings or something inside there. It's just a hunch because obviously I wasn't here, but more than likely that's what happened. So it took me a little while. Once I diagnosed the compressor, I had to go open up a supply house, pick up the compressor. I had to go pick up some more lights because I didn't have enough of these lights to light up this area. Recovered the gas, replaced the compressor, replaced the dual pressure control. Now, I kind of said something earlier in the video. The reason why I changed the pressure control is I was assuming that the compressor was shutting off on high head pressure, but I wasn't here to see it. So it's kind of like a cheap insurance thing. I don't know what caused that compressor to go off on thermal, whether or not, if the high pressure control wasn't working, that could cause it to go off on thermal overload. Or if it just went on and off so many times on high pressure, it could also cause it to go off on thermal. So just as kind of a cheap insurance, I went ahead and replaced the pressure control. I ended up changing it over to a dual pressure control. Before they had just a low pressure and then a high pressure and a fan cycle. This system doesn't necessarily need the fan cycle control because the climate we have out here, there's no need for it. So I went ahead and bypassed the fan cycle control, or took it out of the picture, and just wired up high and low. So now we're operating properly. Also, in the video, I showed that I found when I pulled the rotolok fitting off of the suction service port on the compressor, I found a giant red piece of plastic stuck inside there. And what I believe it was the actual plastic that comes shipped with the service valve, and it was all sheared off. So that was interesting. Because I found that plastic in there, I went ahead and adjusted the CPR valve to make sure that that was set correctly. And everything else is operating. So what I ended up finding on the swamp cooler was that the water pump is just so dirty. It had a screen on it, and the screen was doing its job. It just plugged up to where it wasn't allowing the water pump to run, or to pump water basically. So the pump was still running, it just wasn't able to pull anything through all the sludge that was stuck on the screen. The swamp cooler's in really bad shape. It needs new pads. We've already told them about that. So what I'm gonna do is I just went ahead and cleaned up the pump for now, got it operating. We're gonna come back out, put new pads on it, new belt, new water pump, just for the hell of it. It gets so hot out here in the spring and summertime. They regularly hit 120, 125, even higher sometimes. So that swamp cooler pretty much is gonna run from this day all the way until October now. And right now it's the beginning of April, or a week into April or whatever. So that swamp cooler, basically, if they maintained it properly, they'd probably need to change pads on that at least 2 or 3 times during the summer because of how much it runs. It really plugs up those pads. So anyways, I'm gonna be coming back. We're gonna let this thing operate through the rest of the weekend, and we'll come back out, check on the compressor again, make sure everything's straight with it, and then we'll change those pads on that swamp cooler and get that operational. And other than that, I'm just gonna clean up my tools, put the panels back on the rack, and hopefully get out of here soon. That's it.